in reactive forms, template driven forms. So we learned about how do we deal with validation in a template driven forms. In that we discussed about form state validation. For understanding the form state validation, one example I given to you. So in this example, we designed a form state validation to understand all the validation attributes actually. Is it pristine, is it dirty, or all these options. Just only one basic example I will give you here. Yep. So form validation dot component dot html. So nothing to do in our TypeScript. Everything is configured inside this HTML page. So this is the example I given actually. So here we understood about what is a form state validation service. That means verifying all the fields in the form simultaneously at the same time. That's what actually form state validation. So this is the example we learned. So about what is pristine, what is dirty, what is invalid, valid, and submitted. So today I given you 2 points actually. That means until or unless the form is valid, we don't want submit button to work. In that case, obviously what we can do is we can configure a disabled property for the control. Here we are using disabled, submitted like this. So generally we disabled that based on the form validation. If form is invalid, it is disabled. So all are Boolean values. They will return true or false. So based on that, you have to configure. We will create one example also, we will create. But first we understood what is meant by pristine, dirty, valid, invalid, and submitted like options. Okay. Next important, we need to know about input state validation services. We need to know about input state validation services. Validation services. Actually, input state validation services is nothing but input state is input state validation. Input state is input state validation. Validation is verifying every form element individually. That means so you can validate every form field and identify identify the issues with the form field. So identify the issues simply. So technically we have to verify every field. What is problem in form state validation is, suppose it is showing that it is invalid is true. What invalid is true? That means why it is invalid? We don't have a clarity of that. Why it is invalid? We don't have clarity. We just know that it is invalid. So which field is invalid? Is name invalid or mobile invalid So if name invalid, why it is invalid? Is min length problem, is required problem, is pattern problem? We need to verify all this. Technically, we need to understand all this. For that, individually to verify every field, you have input validation services. And almost they are similar to form state validation services actually. So we have input validation services, the basic services that we have here, the service and property, and we have the description. So the service name and the property name almost all are similar. Few additional things are there here. The service we have ng pristine, and the property is pristine. And same, it is nothing but it returns true when any specific element is not yet modified. So that means these are all Boolean things. That means it returns true. It returns true. So when any specific element, when specific element is not yet modified. So when any specific element is not yet modified, that means it returns true. And ng dirty, so that is dirty. Same like form. So it returns true. So when the value of form element is modified. When the value of form element is modified, then usually it will return true. We have option ng touched actually, touched. ng touched is touched. Actually, the intention of touched is it returns true when element got focus and blurred. That means it returns true when element got focus, when element gets focus and blurred. So technically it is to verify whether it is touched or not actually. That means you went there, you went into any specific element and you came out, then it is called touched. If you have done modifications inside, then it is dirty. It is dirty. So otherwise it is just touched. Touched means you went there and came out. The element gets focus and blur. Blur means you came out of it. That is untouched. And another one is ng untouched. That is untouched. That means so it returns true when element is never touched. When element never touched, it returns true. So it returns true. So if element never touched, and we have ng valid, and that is valid. So it returns true. If all input validations are true. So and ng invalid if input field is valid actually. That means you can simply say input validation means all input data is valid. So it returns true when all input validations are valid actually. When all are valid, then it will return true. Invalid means, so if it returns true if any one validation property returns invalid. You will see them. We will use all of them and we will see how to work with them actually. Another option, we have ng errors. Actually, ng errors is used with errors. Technically, errors, it is an object that contains collection of all errors related to input field. It is a object. It is an object that collects all errors of input field. It is a object that collects all errors of input field. That means like technically it is an object. Yeah. So like errors of all errors of all are nothing but like we have required error, we have min length error, we have max length error, we have pattern error, we have email error, like this. So it is a collection. It is an object that collects all the errors. So and identifies the specific error. So how to use them, we will see. One simple example we will see. Now, important, these are input validation services. That means we use them with the input fields. Syntactically, we use them with the input fields, like in the syntax. So we have txt name dot pristine, like txt name dot invalid, like this. We configure in this way. We technically define and configure in this way. Now we will see one example how we can handle the fields individually, how we can manage them. Let's see. So various situations. Let's create one example. In this form validation itself, so I will design everything, right? So I don't want so much options here, just I want to design one simple. So let's create a form and define it. I will remove all this content here. Yeah. Okay, so let's keep this normal in a simple way, right? How we can handle the input validation, work with the input validation. So first we are creating a form. So I will say register user. I'm designing a form element. And for that we define a name, FRM register, and it is having the reference for ng form. And let's keep a data list here, and with the data term username, and data definition. So input type is equal to text, and let's keep the name as txt name and the class as form control. Okay, right. So now we have the input name, and let's keep this now dynamic ng model, and txt name is equal to ng model. So dynamic configuration we are defining. Let's add some properties for this. First, I will show you basically one option, like suppose it is using a validation required. Okay. Now, similarly, another data term, and here I am defining something like mobile. So mobile. Okay. So and let's add another data definition. Input type is equal to text, and the name is equal to txt mobile and ng model, and hash txt mobile is equal to ng model. Okay, and class as form control. Okay, and this is also having required option. Initially, both are defined with only one validation. Okay, now let's keep some button here. Under that, I will just add a button control here. So class as btn, and btn primary, btn block. Okay, so and let's keep this as register. So this is the form that we have designed. So it is having that. Just for our convenience sake here, wherever we have data list, so width as some 400 pixels, and margin auto. Yeah, so justify items center, align items center. Okay, just these options I defined, and it will keep that here. And our contents also we will keep inside this. So the button also kept inside the data list, and the header also defined. Header also defined inside it. Okay. So we just kept this option here. Now important is the username and the mobile are required. Individually, we need to validate them. So already they have a required validation. Now we need to display a message related to them. So here I'm adding a span. It says name required. And for the mobile, I keep a span. So name required. I'm using the class as text danger. So class as text danger. Now here, so you see, so name required and name required. Here, this is mobile required. Second one is mobile required. So mobile required and name required. Those are the two options there. But here the point is, I want to display those messages. Usually I want to display those messages only when the required problem is there. And if I'm entering some name, it should remove that, hide that. I entered some mobile, it should hide that. Then the display of this message, name required, mobile required, depends on whether that field is valid or not. If text box name is valid, then don't show this. If it is invalid, display. That means when to display this span, when that is invalid. Then how you can add a message or remove message? We use our ng if here. Ng if requires a condition. Condition is simple. So the condition is if txt name dot the property is invalid. If txt name is invalid, then add this message. If it is not invalid, then no. Similarly, second one we use here. So similarly, second one here, we simply keep here an ng if txt mobile is invalid, then display that message. And you can see now, here it is showing that message here, name required, mobile required. I entered name, then it is no longer there. I entered mobile, then it is no longer there. Suppose I am not entering here mobile, then it says mobile required. I entered mobile, then it is fine. Removed, then it is required. Name also I am removing. So then you can see it says name required. I enter something, it is okay. Removed, then it says required. That's simple and good, easy. We can just handle that. But user starts any interaction, that means a form cannot open directly with error messages. That's wrong. That means currently our form is wrong because you can't open with error messages. You should display error messages when he is trying to submit. Suppose I want these error messages to display when he is trying to submit the form. How you know that he is trying to submit the form? When he clicks the submit button. How you know that he clicked the submit button? We can know that he clicked the submit button by using form submitted validation property. Validation property. That means now what we can do here, I will write in this way. Because it is a condition, you can add multiple also. So if frm register dot submitted, frm register dot submitted and text is invalid, that means it indicates that form is submitted and it is invalid, means both should satisfy. When both are satisfying, so form is invalid, form is submitted, and text box is invalid. Similarly here, so frm register dot submitted and mobile is invalid. Now you can observe here, when I open the form, by default you will not see the messages. That's good. But when user tries to click on register without entering proper details which are required, then those messages will fire up. Those messages will fire up. That's good. That's good. That means that is the best way. That means we need to use a combination of form state and input state here. Form state verifies whether the form submitted or not, whether the form modified or not, whether the form valid or not, all fields are valid or not. We use combination here. We use a combination. For example, this is one condition, form submitted and it is invalid. Suppose I am trying to write some other condition, or we are writing a condition. So or if txt name dot touched and txt name dot invalid. I am writing like this. txt name touched and txt name invalid. That means here initially the message is not displayed there. The message is not displayed. So I went into that name text box and without entering anything, I came out here. Then the message will come. That's good. That is more better. Now you have two situations here. Two situations are one, you click on register, it will show up. Or before you click register, you just went there into that field and came out. Then immediately it identifies that you touched it. That is called touched and untouched actually. So you touched that. That means it got focus. You haven't done any modification. This is not pristine or dirty. Pristine or dirty means when you done some modification, that means you entered some value. Touched and untouched means you just went there and came out. Blur and focus actually. And came out, then it will display it. The same approach for mobile, I clicked there and came out. It's not there because we haven't written for mobile touched or not. That means we can write the condition here. So we can configure the condition here as we can use or txt mobile dot touched and txt mobile is invalid, touched and invalid. Then you have this message. Now you can see that I click inside the mobile without entering, I came out, then it will show. I entered something, then it is fine. So both will fire up automatically, both will fire up when I click on submit button. It will not allow to submit. And of course, you can add a combination like until or unless it is valid, don't allow submit button to work, register button to work. But currently that situation is not good for us because we are asking them that you can submit, but if there is any invalid field inside, so then we will not submit. We will fire up the error messages. And remember one point is we cannot directly show up the error messages whenever the page loads, right? We cannot directly show up the messages. Message must be displayed only when user tries to submit the form or user tries to do some modifications in the form. So by default, we don't want to show. Then we have to use all these conditions coming in. We want all these conditions coming in. That's how we define. Here, this is one example. That means this is one example of both form state and input state validation. So for both form and input state validation, both are working here. So that means form submitted or not, input field touched or not, we are verifying that. So, but here the point is form and input state validation is working. And this is the example. So validation, form validation dot form validation dot component dot HTML. Only HTML is required for us, and this is all the logic. This is all the logic. But here this is okay up to this part, that is okay. Up to this part, that is okay. But problem in this is some more problems you will face here. Is the problem here is if a form field is having multiple validations. Let's do that here. I will remove the validations. Span, I removed it. Okay. Now see what I'm doing is for name field, one required validation is there and the min length validation is there. Min length is equal to some 4 characters. Okay, fine. That is min length. And you can add pattern, min length, required, so many. Here also we have required and we have pattern. Pattern like some /+91 and /d and here 10 digits, something like this. Okay, that's just a pattern I written here. So that is the point. So that is the option. Now, two validations are used here. There can be multiple validations for a field. Now, these two fields have multiple. One required is there, one min length is there. Now, how many messages you need? I need two messages. Okay, one span. This is need required. Okay. Next, what? Another span. This time, this is name to short. That is for min length actually. Similarly, for mobile also I want span. I defined mobile required, and another span says invalid mobile because mobile pattern is not matching, invalid mobile. That is multiple. Now, what will be the condition for showing this name required and short? If I write like this, like ng if txt name dot invalid, that is not good. Why not good? Because this will be invalid. This will be invalid even when min length have the problem. That means invalid will fire up on both occasions. Required invalid, min length invalid. Then this message will display for both situations. No, this message is only for the required problem. But observe carefully here. Observe carefully here. You see, both messages are there here. Name required and name too short. Mobile required, invalid mobile. Now here we return invalid. So see here, I am writing the name. Then you see it says name too short, but it is satisfying actually. And it have more than 4 characters because for that we haven't written the condition. We haven't written the condition. Okay. Suppose so name is not short or so name is here. You can see some 3 characters. You can see name required message coming, but name is fulfilled. Required is fulfilled. If required is fulfilled, why again required is coming? Because you said invalid and actually length is not valid, then this message will come for length also. So that means now problem is you cannot use invalid or valid. So here one basic thing is, so you cannot use invalid or valid properties for a field that comprises of multiple validations. So what we can do is you can use errors object to identify the specific error, in input field. So invalid and valid are not good every time. So we have to go with errors, which is used for identifying what the error is exactly. So how you manage this, how you can define this. So let's see. Now the point is here, if you are planning for writing multiple, then keep your messages here. So required and short. Now first condition, what is the first condition? These messages should fire up when the text box is invalid. Okay, good. Then I will keep in a container div. In the div, we keep all this. That means in the div, we have name required and this. These two also we will remove and we keep in a div. So that means mobile required and invalid mobile. These options we are configured. Okay. Now the next step here is this div should display. That means this div should be added. Text box is touched. That means here we will, so that is color for both messages will have the same color here, red. Both messages are coming. Okay. This div should be added. The div should be added when it is submitted or touched. Any condition you give, like previously we written, then I will. So if txt name dot touched and if text box is touched and txt name is invalid, then this div will be added. Okay, good. In this div, when this message should be added, name required message should be added when text box is having a required error. Then here we have to define. So ng if this should be added when we are having the txt name and txt name is having an error. You see errors. Errors is an object. So technically the errors object. So errors is an object which contains collection of all these errors. So we will go here and we will see. You can see this is an error object. All the validation errors are collected by this errors object. Now which error? You can access the error. It is an object. All errors are present as properties and that is required. That means if the error is matching with required property, then this message will fire up. This span will come. If it is not matching with required, then it will hide it. It will remove it. Similarly, ng if txt name dot errors, if it is related to min length, then fire up the second message. That is how we need to handle multiple validations. How we can handle multiple validations. You see here same. What we need to define ng if so txt mobile dot touched and txt mobile dot invalid, mobile touched and mobile invalid. Okay, then add this div. In this div, when to add these messages? So add this message if txt mobile is having error matching with required, and display this one ng if txt mobile its errors is matching with pattern. It is matching with pattern. So that is how we can configure. So how we can define. Now observe initially you can see the validation messages not there. I clicked inside the text box and out here, then it says name required. That's good. But actually it is having multiple errors, but it is showing only name required. I started typing the name and it says name too short. Okay, that's good. And we entered some name and minimum 4 characters. Now it is okay. If it is not satisfying, then it says name too short. If the required is not satisfying, then it says name required. That's good. That is how we handle multiple validations for one element, for a specific element, how we deal with multiple. Mobile also same now. I touched it, mobile required. So here name entered, fine. So I am starting here, mobile required, okay. I entered 9, it is saying invalid mobile. So I entered some mobile, it is invalid mobile. I said plus 91, then it is okay. And if I am not entering any number, then it says mobile required. And wrong number, then it is invalid mobile. So the messages will change according to what you have defined. If there are multiple validations defined for one element, then you have to manage those by using an errors object, because you have multiple messages to display, but all will not be displayed at the same time. So depending on the situation, the messages will be changing. Now you need to use block and combination of the block, how you define here. That's how we need to manage. So that is the basic approach, how we can configure the validation. Here the point is, so here the point is, this is example, right? Here some more options are there. It's not yet done, right? I will copy that. So I will just give you an example here. Another example. So this is related to errors object to handle multiple errors, how we can handle the multiple errors for a specific element. That is the point here. Okay. This is the same. I changed this now for handling multiple errors. But one of the main problem here, again, the main problem here is you are configuring the options. You are configuring and defining the options. Multiple are there. Errors, we can identify different errors, but we don't have validation for every field. We don't have validation for every field. We don't have validation for every field provided for every field in the same way how you need actually. So then very important is, that means see, now if anyone asks you a question like, can I use required for radio button, or can I use required for drop down list? Can I use required for radio buttons drop down list or check boxes like that? Can we use required? So can we use required property for radio button and checkbox and like these controls? So for validation, to handle required validation. So that is the question. So the answer is no, you can't. So required property, cannot be used. You cannot use required property for this. You cannot. Now the question is, if I cannot use the required property, then how to handle the validation for them? How you can configure and define the validation for them? So that means, can we use required property for radio buttons, drop downs, and list boxes? No, you cannot do that. It's not possible. It's not possible to define that. Then what is the solution? That means you have to define custom validations. You have to define custom validations. That's what regularly in interviews also they ask. So how to handle custom validation? Custom validation is nothing but, so what is the concept of custom validation? So custom validation. So every input validation, so cannot be handled by using HTML validation properties. so right function. You have to write custom methods. Simply say that custom methods and report an error. Put a select. I'm defining so in as LST cities. Okay, it is a model, and here we define hash LST cities is equal to some model ng model, and we just keep this as a form control class as form control. We are configuring. In this selector, we have option. So we have option, and this option is your city. So choose a city. Select your city. Select city. Select city is the option. That is the first option because I don't want any one option by default. I don't want any option by default. I need to enter to select a city. Before that, it will be using this one. Okay, option. And here we have Delhi. And here we have an option. So now the problem is the validation. Is the key point is actually a programming for a programming language, the first option is also a city only because it is also considered as an option. All are options only. It doesn't know that that is not a city because it cannot identify anything by using value. It cannot identify by using its here directly text. By using text, it cannot identify anything. That means it cannot say that this is not a city. It thinks that. So now if I say required, then it is nothing happening here. It cannot happen anything here. We cannot use any required for this. So if user is not selecting a city, so if user is not selecting a city, that means usually suppose I defined here as an option. Option have a lot of properties selected. That means by default one option is selected. By default one option is selected. So that's option is selected. But dynamically you are configuring when you defined as a model requires a value. Now you say selected for anyone. So first one or second one or anyone, it is unable to handle that selection because it is expecting dynamically now. That means user have to select now. User have to select. By default, it is not selecting anything. User will select. Okay. If user have to select, how he knows that he is selected or not? How he knows that it is selected? We can make by default one selected by passing a dynamic value. That is general thing that you will see in reactive forms, how to handle dynamic values actually. Initially, so the point is how the drop down knows that the first one user selected is not a city. So, and we need to keep a message here. We need to keep a message here. So please select your city. please select your city. And we put a class here as text danger. We'll put here text danger. So that means uh, you can give anything you want. I am talking about drop down, and I don't know why you are talking about search box, right? You can do anything, whatever you want. You can use an autocomplete option. Why you use a search box? Generally, people use autocomplete option. They don't use a search box. You know that? We learned about autocomplete in material. Yeah? People never use any search box there. Search box is different. We use autocomplete option there. If you have followed our class, we learned that we can use an autocomplete. Remember the, yeah, uh, it is not a search box. It's your wish, whatever you want, you use, right? But every requirement will not be same, right? You use autocomplete, you use autocomplete, no objection, right? We are talking about how to handle for anything which is not possible implicitly, how we can manage them. All right. So here the point is generally we cannot use any required option. Required option. You see here the message says please select your city. So that means I am trying here something like required for this drop down. And here I am writing an option like ngIf. ngIf is equal to LST cities. So we have LST cities. We need to give a reference name, LST cities. Yeah. If LST cities dot required, that means dot invalid, something like this I give it. Because only one problem is there. If it is invalid, then you can see here. I'm selecting here a city, then it is not there. I'm selecting the first one, then also not there. That means that doesn't suits because it thinks that first is also a city. That means here when I open this and I select the first one, select city, it's not showing error, but it should show error. It should say that this is not a city you selected, right? It doesn't know that because required can be used on this element, but it will wait until a value comes. Once the value comes, it doesn't know which value it is. It will validate everyone. So this is not suitable here. This is not suitable here. We cannot use that. Why? Because it knows that value is passed. Required is used for every element which can recognize a value, but it will never suit here. It is not correct here. Then how do you manage that? Because when user selects the first one, it should say that please select. Then how do you manage this? Generally, what we do now is we use our all programming technique now. We have to write. That means this is not depending on, this is not depending on required, valid, invalid. We can't manage that. We have to write our own functions and we need to validate. That is what custom validation. I'm not talking about just only drop down. Some more I will show you. You can understand that, right? For example, suppose you are entering the details here. Suppose we are configuring here. So let's see how to verify. First, let's see how to verify this. So generally, first point is whenever user is selecting the drop down and I need to send its value. When user selects the drop down, I need to collect the value. And every option is having a value. The value is no city. That means, so it is not a city. Okay. And the value is Delhi. And the value is Delhi, Hyderabad. You know this. Generally, when you select, the value is submitted. What you see is text. What is submitted is value, right? Which one you want to display, that is text actually. This is text. And this is the value. Now, when user is selecting the drop down, we will fire up a function. Then you have to write a function. We are firing up a function. So here I am writing one function. That means we are writing a method here. And the method is simple. Actually, we are creating a method called verify. So verify city. Okay, verify city. And we will declare one property here. So verify city is a method. Verify city is a method. Yeah. And here we will create a property, is city valid. Is city valid? By default, I will say as false. I will keep as false. Is city valid? False. We can use valid or invalid, your wish, how you want to configure that, you can define. That means I am writing a method here as, so is city valid, or display city error, display some error, right? Is city valid? Is false. Okay, that is fine. So, or to make it more clear, I will write like display city error is false. Okay, that means display city error is false. I will attach this Boolean value for this span. That means you can see actually by default that error message is displayed. So I will apply that ng if. So display city error is false. That means it will not show the message. Okay, that's good. When it should show the message, when user is selecting a value and that value is no city value, that means first value. If the first value is no city, we send a no city value. Then display the message. That means you know how to write event here. Event is nothing but you need to configure the event, like when user is changing this. That means when user is changing the drop down, this verify city will fire up. Okay, that means we will write here on the change event, verify city will fire up. Into that method, we need to pass the selected city value. That you can do by using txt lst cities dot value. lst cities dot value, it will pass the selected city value. Okay, we will collect that selected city value here. That means we will collect that value here, and we will verify if the value, if the value, that is the selected city value, is equal to no city. If it is coming as no city, then this dot display city error is true. Show the error. That means they haven't selected any city else. So this dot display city error is equal to false. We have to manually write like this. You have to manually configure. We have to manually write like this, right? Now you can see that, here the message here is when user is, these are all validations, these are all working fine. I entered the name, I entered the mobile. City, user is not selecting the city. So select city, then it will fire up. Please select your city. That's good. When user selects a city, then it will not display that. And when user is choosing the first one, then it will. See, lot of doubts will come. Sir, I want on submit, click. You have to write logic. For everything you have to write. Right? How you want, you write. Right? So if you say that, sir, I want on register button click, I want on focus, I want on blur, you write then. If you want, then you have to write. Everything can be achieved. Only the point is you should know when to write and how to handle that. Everything you have to manage with your custom things now. You have to write the methods, you have to write the functionalities. Now the point is, this kind of situation not only here, so many times will come. That's for various things. For example, if I opened websites like some IRCTC or IRCTC PNR status, something like this. So we open that here, we check into the PNR systems or options here. When you are filling up these forms and options, so sometimes when you are configuring the forms and filling the forms and all, usually what happens is here, you can see it shows a captcha. It shows a captcha. So you have to enter that in that here. Sometimes you might have observed, so these shopping sites, these IRCTC or some other websites, instead of captcha, they generally, what they do is, they simply ask a question like 20 plus 30, how much? They will ask like enter a even number or an odd number, right? You might have seen in several websites. So people asking for that. That means they don't use cap because they need to prevent robot. And to prevent robot, they can use captcha. And sometimes, so without the captcha, they will be asking for certain conditions. This, if it is saying that I am not robot, these are all captcha. So sometimes they say that enter some value. Now everything you cannot match with patterns. You cannot say that I will match with pattern. For example, you see here, these are all the options here. So these are all the options here. And important is, so when I'm not selecting a city, I'm not selecting the state, I'm not selecting the state, then it is showing the message. Icons and all, your wish. You can keep any icon, whatever you want. If you want like this icon to display, you have Font Awesome. In the span, just beside that, you put a Font Awesome icon. That's your wish. You can put anywhere, right? Here the point is, here the major point here is, so suppose everything you cannot write pattern. Suppose pin code. Pin code should start with an alphabet. So pin code should start with a number. Anything alphabet is not valid. If it is valid, I need to show the tick mark. Invalid, it should display like that. These types you can write with patterns. You can write with patterns like there must be 5, 6 digits or 7 digits number. So starting with 5, so ending with 0, something patterns you can write. But for every situation, you cannot write a pattern. For example, I will show here. Suppose I will add another data term here. And here I will say that, so enter an even number. Enter an even number. And we have to verify ourselves as not a robot by entering an even number. Input type is equal to text. Text class is equal to form control. And here name is equal to txt even, and ng model and hash txt even is equal to ng model. Here we need to configure that. Now important is we need to display error message for this, and let's keep a span here. Not an even number. That is the message to display. Now, how you write validation for even number? You cannot write any pattern because generally, as per the general requirements, even number is, so you modulus divide by 2 and verify remainder is 0, then it is an even number. We don't have a pattern. We have to verify by using some function, conditions we have to write, some logic we have to write. So that means I will write here 2 options here, public display even error. That is also false. Okay. Display even error as false. Okay. And write a method. So we are writing a method, public verify even. Okay, verify even. And this verify even should fire up. It should fire up when they finish typing the number. That means we will write on blur here. You can use key up event, key down events. You can write so many things now. So we can verify with regular expressions and we can configure. I will show here. So on blur, so verify even. And into that, I need to pass the value they entered here. That means txt event dot value. Whatever the value they entered inside this text box. And here we have a class as text danger and text danger. And we will display the message here. So based on ng if, and we will display the message here based on display even error, right? Now on blur, it will send the value. Okay, I will collect that value here. So I will collect the value here and I will write a condition here. So if value that you passed is modulus divided by 2, modulus divided by 2 and remainder is equal to 0. Modulus divided by 2 remainder is equal to 0. Then, so display city error is false. That means display even error. This dot display even error is equal to false. Else it should display even error. Display even error is equal to true. So we need to define that here. We need to configure that. So now that is for even number here. We are configuring an even number and we return on blur event actually. That means here, so and type 9 and I click outside, then it says not an even number. So it is verifying it. That means we are writing a condition and we are configuring it and manually we are verifying through a function. Lot of functionality can be written. I just given a simple function. Suppose I say 8, then I click outside, then it is fine. You can write on key up event, you can write on key down event, you can write on blur event, on focus, different situations you know. That means if I am not writing an even number, then it will display that message. And I define this, then it will handle. That means a even number, then it will handle. These are all need to be written manually. These are all need to be written manually. Then generally how you configure the option. So this is not only for drop downs and text boxes. This is generally handled. This is generally handled even for radios checkboxes. So it is handled by using radios and checkboxes. We can configure that. That means, for example, suppose if you want to handle that by using radios and checkboxes, how to manage, right? One simple example I will show you here. Suppose if you want to deal with radios and checkbox, then usually what we do is here I'm defining option like radios. Now you can guess and you can tell how it can happen actually. Suppose I defined here, so after the mobile a data term, so say gender. And here, so data definition. And here we said input type is equal to radio. And radio name is equal to gender. Gender name is equal to gender. And you know that ng model, and here we need to define hash. So gender, so gender, that means OPT gender. OPT gender. OPT gender is equal to, OPT gender is equal to, so it is ng model. Okay. Same we will give here also OPT gender. Okay. Now this is option like male. Option like male. And here similarly we are configuring another. So both have the same option, female. That means we have the same option. And very important is, so as you saw in the IRCTC website, so there is an option. So there is another option here. So choose one. Here I said some choose. So that means suppose I said none. So none, something like this I defined. That means here the point is, so how you will verify, the options, because see, here we have a value as none, and here we have a value as male, and here we have a value, so value as female. Now these three radios are configured here. The radios are configured here. They need to choose one gender. By default, this none. So suppose user is selecting none, then it should not allow. It should say that please select male or female, right? That means user need to choose any one of these two. And how we know that they selected none, or they selected male, or selected female? Nothing special, that you can try by yourself now, because already you saw that. Now what we can do, we can define, because all will fire up, out of all only one will work. We will write a change event for radios also. We will call the function. We will pass the radio value into it. If the radio value is none, then we will say that you haven't selected any gender, right? That's simple. That means for every concept, now you can try by yourself. For every validation, you can try by yourself. So for everything, predefined validations are not present. We have to write. Sometimes we can write the regular expressions. For the regular expressions, it can display the messages. Sometimes we cannot write regular expressions because it requires some manipulations to happen. Logically, some manipulations to happen. For example, if you remembered, I already showed you when we learned key up, key down like options. I want to verify whether username is existing or taken or available. I showed you already one validation I showed you. There we have to write by our own. We have to write by our own and verify every function. That's what actually the custom validations are. Now you can write for everyone. If you know the technique, like you need an event, on the event you pass the value, you verify is the value is among what you are expecting, then don't show any error. If it is not among what I am expecting, then show an error. That's what actually custom validation is, configuring custom validation. So the example for this is the example for the custom validation. So is this. So form validation dot component dot ts. In the ts file, we added some logic now. So because these are all required some additional functionalities, we need to add some validation related functionalities here. And in the form validation dot component dot html. So here we need to design this. So this is all designed for this, right? And we are configuring. That is important about validations, how we can handle the validations, input validation, form state validation. And one important point while working with validations these days, we don't want the validations, technically, we don't want the validations with messages actually. We don't want the validations with messages. We don't want the validations with messages. Why we don't want with the messages? Because usually when we are dealing with validations, so with messages on devices like mobile or compact devices, then it is complex to show so many messages. These days you can see on compact devices, we use everything through colors. That means we show a red color, we show a green color, we can define the effects through colors. Actually, we can define the colors manually by ourselves. We can add the colors manually for the controls. So because we learned about class, ng class, we can apply the effects directly by ourselves. But another important option here is, one special option here is, Angular provides CSS validation classes. By using those CSS validation classes, we can simply apply the effects. we can simply apply the effects colors. Manually you can define. Manually defining means it takes complex things, because for example, see, I want this text box to get in red color if it is not entered. I want the text box to display in red color. That text box should be in red color. So the text box should be in red color. In that case, usually, so if you want the text box to be displayed in the red color for that, then usually what we can do here is we need to apply the effect. It should be green color when it is valid. It should be red color if it is invalid. Then how you will change the effects actually? In the CSS, we will write here like valid style. So I'm writing a class as valid style. In the valid style, I am defining border as 1 pixel or border as 2 pixel. So like solid. And I define as some green color. And I say some box shadow for that as 2 pixel and 3 pixel green color. That is the valid style. And I am defining another one is invalid style. We have an invalid style. Invalid style, we will transform this to red color. We are writing our custom effects actually. Now these styles, these classes need to be applied. These classes need to be applied to these controls, Then how you can apply a CSS class to these controls? Based on the validation state. Based on the validation state, they need to apply. In that case, what you can do here is for this input text, what we can define here is, you know how to apply classes dynamically. If you remembered, we can use ng class. And how to turn on and off the classes. If you remembered, we learned class binding. We can use an object reference. And in that, what is it? We have valid style. So we have an valid style. So whether to apply this valid style or not, we have to pass a Boolean value. Boolean value is depending on if the text box is valid. That means txt name dot valid. If txt name dot valid, valid style will be applied. Okay, then comma, we will use invalid style. It will be applied when txt name is invalid. That means we are applying the effects dynamically. So you know that, so that is ng class, it is defining that. You can see red color. So because it is invalid, I entered some name here. It is valid. It is less than that characters, then it is name too short, it is showing the message also. And if it is satisfying with all the requirements, then it will be in green color. We can add the classes manually. That means, so you can define, so CSS effects for elements based on validation state, you can say that using validation properties we can define. For that, actually, I have to do these two things. That means I have a form validation dot component dot CSS, component dot CSS, and in that we are configuring this. And form validation dot component dot HTML. In that we need to everything same, only one line changed actually. So this is what you need to modify. The rest of options are same. That is what you can do for others also. So this is what you have to change. We have to use this ng class. But Angular have one special ability. Without using these classes manually, means without writing such switching of classes manually, Angular provides built-in CSS classes. Angular provides CSS classes for validation. You can use those classes. What is the specialty of those classes is they will identify the validation state of that particular element, and according to the state, they will apply the effects. You don't need to use this ng class for displaying that. So that how we can manage the CSS classes for validation. How do we work with them? One simple example we will see in tomorrow's session. Then tomorrow, very important, we will go into the concept of reactive forms now, how to create model driven forms and work with them, right? Tomorrow we'll continue with this.